Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life. This is a place to be for education about asexuality. So subscribe and hit the bell icon right now. So asexuals come in all different shapes and sizes and flavours. So if you're an asexual who feels like you don't quite fit into the asexual spectrum, it's okay, because many asexuals don't fit into a tight little neat category of asexuality. And as I was saying on one of the last streams I did, your difference is your beauty. I want to read a quote from Diary Confessions of a Hyperromantic Asexual. This is life lesson number 70. No one has the right to define a relationship other than the people who are in it. This goes for all relationships, and it especially goes for asexual relationships, because a lot of people like to tell us what to do. They like to tell us, but sex is normal, but sex makes life so much more exciting. Life without sex must be so boring. Like, what do you do all day? Like, have you got a disorder? Is something wrong? What made you be that way? What caused that to happen? Right? And a relationship without sex is just friendship. Like, what the F? And we get all these rude comments. We get all these comments that are just like really not thought out. They're really illogical. And they're just like what the majority have stereotypically believed and shoved down everyone's throats for so long. Right? No one should be defining what a relationship is other than the people that are in it. And just because you're not having sex doesn't mean to say it's not a relationship. There are many people besides asexuals that don't have sex in a relationship or can't have sex in a relationship. For example, people that have got certain disabilities, people who have certain health conditions, physical health conditions, and people that are like impotent, for example. There are also people who abstain from sex voluntarily. So asexuality is not the same as abstaining. Asexuality is a genuine sexual orientation that's based on a lack of sexual attraction, and it's an innate thing. So we innately don't need, want, or desire sex if we're a pure asexual. We lack all sexual attraction whatsoever. So there's pure asexuals and grey asexuals. So grey asexuals are on the more sexual end of the asexual spectrum, and they may want sex or may not, depending on what type of grey asexual they want, but they do experience sexual attraction, but only under limited, rare, or specific circumstances, or they experience it but not enough to want to act on it. So the ones that experience it but not enough to want to act on it, it's that way. They don't want to act on it. And so this makes the asexual spectrum very interesting. And of course, like I said, all different flavors, all different types of asexuals. So there's a lot of myths regarding asexuals and what asexuals will and won't do in relationships. There are the sex repulsed asexuals that will never have sex, that don't want it, that don't need it, that some asexuals actually physically throw up if they do sex. And it disgusts them, and they never ever want it. It's something that they just don't want to have. And if you say it to them, it will just turn them off. Right? So you also have sex repulsed asexuals, like myself, who are repulsed for me personally, but I'm okay if other people want to have sex, like it, enjoy it, it's consensual, but don't get me involved. Right? Then you have the sex neutral asexuals that don't mind if they have sex or they don't have it. They can take it or leave it. Then you have the sex positive asexuals that may want to engage in sexual activity because they like the sensations it gives them. They're in a committed relationship, or maybe not a committed relationship. They're in a relationship. Not every asexual is in a committed relationship. There are some asexuals that do have sex without being in a committed relationship. You might think, how does that work? But I have known asexuals to do that. Not a lot, not many, but it can happen, right? So what I'm trying to say is some asexuals do have sex for a variety of reasons. Some like trying it out to see what it feels like, even though they don't experience sexual attraction. They're curious about it. Others have a partner and they either want to please a partner or they want to be physically close to that partner as much as possible by being as close physically as possible, like in each other, basically. And so there's a variety of reasons, but what we have to remember is every asexual is different. And so every relationship will be different. There's some asexuals that are into kinks and BDSM stuff, but they don't actually want the penetration. So if you can imagine an asexual person like that who wants a relationship without penetrative sex, then they're going to be looking for someone who's also most likely either going to be into BDSM or kinks or both. Right. And so they might have a non-penetrative sexual relationship. So they're not actually having sex, but they might do other kinky stuff and BDSM stuff, like spanking or tying up, handcuffing, this type of thing. I'm not into this type of thing at all, but I'm just saying. So you can imagine they can be lots of different types of relationships without sex within asexuality, but they still might do other stuff. Some have fetishes. Some asexuals have foot fetishes, for example. And if it's a sexual foot fetish, in my understanding, because I don't have fetishes myself, but I've had guys that have had foot fetishes been interested in me. So I'm like, what is that? When I've looked it up, it basically means if it's a sexual relationship, right, then the guy is expecting his balls to be played with the foot, right? And stuff like that. It's making me cringe. I'm not into this at all. But if it's an asexual that's into it, it can be massaging the feet, kissing the feet, touching the feet, stroking the feet. And I guess some might like to lick the feet. So you can have like different types of relationship. And if you think about all the different types of relationships someone could have, like what gives someone the right to define a relationship just purely by whether you're having sex or not? That's absolutely illogical and ridiculous when there's so many different types of relationships. There's so many different genders. There's so many different types of love in the world. There's so many different types of pairings. And so to just have a blanket statement as like, oh, if you're not having sex, it's not a relationship. It's just a load of nonsense. There are people, for example, who are heterosexual and they're actually in a heterosexual relationship, but they don't actually have sex for months or years. And it doesn't mean to say they love each other any less. It doesn't mean to say they're not in a real relationship. It just means to say they're having a relationship without sex. So it should be the people in the relationship that define it, not other people, not outside people. What has it got to do with anyone else? What these people do inside of their own relationship? What's it got to do with anyone else? It's none of anyone else's business, right? It gets me really annoyed when I've had so many guys. I'm not active on dating sites anymore. I'm breaking from online dating, right? But, there are so many guys and they just so expect sex when you're on a dating site. And if they don't have sex or know they're not going to get it with you, it's like, so what will you do for me? Will you give me a blowjob? And it's like, why does it have to equate to sexual stuff? Not every relationship has to have sexual stuff in it. I know asexuals that are happily married. And as far as I know, they're sex repulsed asexuals and don't have sex. There's no need for you to have sex in a relationship unless you personally want to and the people or person involved with you wants to. I'm a hyper romantic and a hyper kisser, but I'm sex repulsed. So if I end up ever in a relationship ever again, which at the moment I'm not really interested in getting into a relationship ever again, I'm focused on my career and other aspects. I'm loving being single right now and I'm feeling good and I'm writing lots of books and I got so much to do. But if I ever did, it would be like a hyper kiss or hyper romantic style of relationship that I'd be interested in, which is a very different type of relationship to any relationship I know. Yeah, there are hopeless romantics. There are people that are really romantic, right? But I'm hyper romantic. But I hardly ever, ever in my entire life come across anyone who's a hyper kisser. And when I'm talking about hyper kissing, I'm talking about kissing for hours, nearly non-stop, and never getting bored. This is something that I haven't really heard of apart from with me. I've heard of hypersexuals, which can have sex for like 2 hours or more. I knew someone, well, I still know of them. I just don't regularly talk to them anymore, but I'm still connected to them on Facebook. And they actually came through the asexual community originally as a demisexual person. And then when they met the partner of their dreams, they were ended up wanting they end up finding out they're a hypersexual. They're married with a kid. But they told me this, and I'm like, wow, okay. So I don't know if they still identify as demisexual, but that was like how they identified at the time, which is how they were in my asexual group. And so, that you can imagine that I don't know how, because I'm not into sex, I don't know how anyone can do sex for that long. But as I'm a hyper kisser, I can relate to the fact of doing something for pleasure that excites you, that you enjoy for hours, and not being bored and being hyper over it. So I can get it from a hyper point of view, and something that gives pleasure and excitement. I personally get pleasure and excitement through sex. I get it through the kissing, but I can relate to the element of hyperness and activity for that long, but not with sex. I can't, because like, okay, that must get a bit sore, right? So anyway, that's what I mean. Like, if I have a relationship, I like loads of public kissing as well. I don't like kissing just indoors. It doesn't suit me. I hate it. I feel like some caged animal. That's how I personally feel. I like to be free, like a bird, like that, and a butterfly, to kiss whenever I want. So, that's again a different type of relationship. It's like a very hyper romantic, hyper kisser relationship. Very quite intense, I guess, very hyper. There's a lot of hyperness, but I love personally my hyper personality. So I've got to find a guy who either complements that, or who is like that himself, or enjoys that a lot. It's kind of, he's really into that. So that's a different type of relationship again. And there's so many, like I said, different types of relationships. There are some asexuals that watch porn. I'm not one of them. I personally can't stand it, and I get disgusted by it. But there might be an asexual that watches porn, and then they have a heterosexual partner and they watch it together and stuff like that. I mean, like, personally, I would consider watching porn cheating. That's my personal point of view. So when you're in a relationship, it should only be the people in it that define the rules. Like, what is cheating? Hi, Heather. Lots of love. They commercialized it. Yes, they have commercialized sex a lot, Heather. That's a very good point. They commercialize it, and then obviously people buy a lot of stuff. I'm sorry I didn't see you before. The chat's gone a bit dark over here, so it's harder to see it. So yeah, it's lovely to see you. So I totally agree with Heather's point. They have commercialized it. I mean, actually, a person talks about this in my Asexual Perspectives book. If you don't know what Asexual Perspectives book looks like, if you're new to this channel and you're watching, then this is what it looks like. A bestseller book. But yes, Heather is absolutely right. They commercialize it. And obviously, by making people want sex and believe sex is the answer to their problems in relationships, it makes people buy more products for sex, right? Obviously condoms is a good thing to buy if you're having sex. You should practice safe sex to keep yourself from sexually transmitted diseases and infections. But obviously they've got sexy lingerie, they've got Viagra to make people want sex. Basically, that's one thing I really hate, is like, with Viagra, I'm like, if a person is not naturally capable of sex, or they don't want it or need it, why try and shove some Viagra down them? And it's like, oh, you've got to make yourself, be erect so you can have sex. It's like, well, why don't you just accept the person for who they are? Like, if they can't have sex, or they don't want it, or they're not in the mood, why don't you just accept that instead of forcing a pill on them? And making their body do things that otherwise it wouldn't usually do. I mean, maybe some people like it, but I feel that's kind of I think of it like a bit of like a torture. It's like, so you're trying to say a person is not good enough as they are. They have to have this product in order to have sex. I mean, some people obviously might love that. They might be like, oh my God, I really want sex and I can't get up. Right. But usually if you can't get up, there's underlying problems like emotional difficulties and stuff like that. Not always, I guess, but there can be underlying difficulties, but it's important to accept a person for who they are. And, to say someone's not in a relationship or can't have love without sex is just very discriminatory and very disgusting. And going back to commercial aspect that Heather spoke about, it's absolutely right. There's a lot of things, for example, in business and marketing. And the situation is, if there is no problem to solve, this is really bad. This is like the dark side of business and marketing and dark psychology. if there is no problem to solve, then people create the problems on purpose so they can have products and services to then fulfill the solution to that problem that they created. It's really scary when you think of this stuff, because there are people that purposely create problems. Do you know, like, I've done research on other dating channels and dating coaches, right? I've done it in the past. And most dating coaches coach women rather than men. And the reason I found out for this is usually men's ego is just so, like, they've got so much ego that they won't admit that they're wrong and need to change. Whereas women are much more likely to be able to change. That's why guys coach women more than men in general. That's why there's more guys coaching women. And even guys that have coached guys then turn to coach women because it's going to be more profitable if they need to change, because they're going to need more products and services to make themselves change. I'm not saying it's about a thing. I'm with Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club, and his teachings and courses in there are an absolute godsend. They are giving me practical knowledge that I never knew about. There's been gaps in my knowledge that's really helping me. So I don't think every dating coach is just out for profit to make money. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is if there isn't a problem there, then they create one. So if you think about, for example, Viagra, I mean, there wasn't Viagra years ago. So if people couldn't have sex because they couldn't get up or wasn't in the mood or they had impotency, it wasn't like, here, stick this and make yourself have sex. It was a case of just accepting it, right? As far as I know, because I wasn't around that many years ago. I don't know when Viagra came out. But what I'm trying to say is, instead of accepting people for who they are and people having different types of relationships, some with sex, some without sex, they're then producing a product saying, hey, you've got a problem. You need to be having sex. You need to be getting up. So we're gonna now create this Viagra product so that you can have that. Even if a person didn't want it, they'll make that person or these people feel bad for not having sex so that they need this product. Do you know what I mean? They create the need. And so even if there's not a need in the first place, they are basically forcing a need on people. Like in some marketings and business, they're telling you, like, this is what's wrong with society. Sometimes it's true. It's not all made up, but there are certain instances where they can create a problem on purpose that they then need to solve for you so that they are literally making profit of it. And I'm sure this is the case in sometimes with sexual stuff. There's like, oh, this person like wants to do this sexually, and oh, it must be such a problem. So I make such a big deal of it that if you're not doing this in the relationship, it means you're failing, you're not giving your partner enough sex, or you're not doing it right. So we need to create this product for you to make it right. And if you don't get it, you're failing as a partner and you're so terrible. Marketing and business works a lot on playing on people's emotions of failure and feeling not good enough and feeling bad about themselves. Heather, there's a lot of pressure. Sex is a competition, which I don't want any part of. That's the way it seems. Yeah. I just, I don't think it's good personally. I mean, I can understand sex for procreation reasons if people want to give birth naturally, but I don't think it should be like this big thing around relationships. I think, for practical terms, if people want sex through natural means, okay, right, if they got the genitalia to do that, right? But otherwise, it should be it could be part of a relationship, but it doesn't have to be. Some people might like to have it. It might be nice for some people. Others don't want it. I don't think it should be like, oh, you have to have sex, otherwise your relationship is not healthy, your relationship is not happy. And this is all the messages they give you. That if your relationship is not having sex and it's dead in the water, this is just ridiculous, right? There are some people out there right now, I'm sure, that are very kind, caring, loving, giving people. And maybe either they don't have sex or they can't have sex for some reason. But they make such a great partner because they're reliable, they're consistent, persistent. They're very kind, they're very caring, they're very loving, right? And those are qualities that you need in a healthy relationship, regardless of where you have sex or not. And some people that are very, very focused on sex, they miss the bad points of a person because they think of sex as a band-aid to cover up problems in the relationship, or to, just stick the problems together, just like, oh, it'll be fine, like just kiss and make up and have sex and everything will be fine, and avoid having difficult conversations, so nothing ever really gets resolved. And and it ends up being a wave of emotions, and the only thing that brings them back together is the sex. And it's like, it's just, but you can feel very lonely like that in a relationship. Even if you're in a relationship, you can feel really lonely, and people don't talk enough about this. You can be in a relationship with someone, you can see them every day, 7 days a week, but you can feel so lonely because there's no emotional connection there, because maybe it's just physical sex, because there's no understanding or compassion or consideration or caringness or kindness. The wise people understand, especially if they're forward thinking and look long term at a relationship, that they need someone who really genuinely loves them and cares about them, who's going to be there through thick and thin with them. Not someone who just likes them for their appearance, not someone who just likes them temporarily when it suits them, not someone who just wants to, like, oh, like, is there and happy when the good times are there, but oh, otherwise I just want to chill and I don't want to deal with you. That's just a very immature attitude. And it's not good. We need a partner that's going to be very good for us in multiple ways, and that's going to be there when we get sick, that's going to be there when we don't look our best, that's going to be there when we've got tummy pains, tummy problems, that's going to be there when we might injure ourselves, that's going to be there because we really genuinely care about the person. That's who you need to be around as time goes on. You don't want to be with a person who you can't rely on to be there if you're in an accident or you're hurt or in pain emotionally. You don't want to be with a person who's callous and uncaring. You don't want to be with a person who's just after looks, because they're just going to go for the next thing they like the look of and the next thing they like the look of. And so, with the amount of pressure that society puts on relationships, they look at the wrong things in relationships. Instead of focusing on sex and, oh, your relationship needs to be having sex to be healthy, that's not it. They should be focusing on the real aspects that make a healthy relationship, such as having kindness in the relationship between both partners, caringness, compassion, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling understood, feeling listened to. All these types of things. Having someone who cares about you as a human being and not a sex object. Having someone who likes your personality. Having someone who feels comfortable having difficult conversations and who is comfortable just chilling out with you under the stars and the moonlit sky. Someone who just wants to cuddle you because they like spending time with you and being in your color, being around you. Someone who's enthusiastic to see you. Someone who actually wants to be with you. Right? The focus should be taken off genitalia and physical stuff, and it should be put onto all these aspects of healthy relationship compatibility. You're meant to work as a team in a relationship, and that means in multiple aspects. Asexuals love through emotional connection. That's what we need, and that's what makes the most sustainable relationships anyway. Whatever sexuality you are, regardless of if you have sex or not, you need the emotional connection and emotional stability together, and also the emotional compatibility, the emotional understanding. You need that. And so, instead of society defining a relationship by how much sex someone is or isn't having in it, is or isn't having in it, they should be focusing on whether the relationship is sustainable or not, with the character traits that people have got and the compatibility. Right? This is just ridiculous, shoving down people's throats all the time that you need sex in a relationship. It isn't a relationship without sex. People are focusing on the wrong things. There's no wonder there's so many divorces, so many affairs, so many hookups, when they're just going sex, 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 sex all the time. And if you're not having sex, you're not having a relationship. It's absolutely ludicrous. What about all the heterosexuals that do have sex, say 3 times a week? Apparently, I think that's the average people who are heterosexual have sex. And imagine all the times in between those 3 days a week when they're not having sex. Do they love their partner any less? So they're going around saying, well, today we're not in a relationship because we're not having sex, but tomorrow I'll be back in a relationship with you because I'm having sex. But the next day I won't because I'm not having sex. And the next day I will because I am having sex. Right? It's just stupid. It's absolutely stupid. And so how can someone possibly say that if you're not having sex in a relationship, you're not having a relationship? When there's thousands of people, millions of people around the globe, and they aren't having sex every single second of every single day, of every single minute, of every single hour. So no one should be defining the relationship other than the people that are in it. If you're having a most amazing, beautiful relationship, one that's kind and compassionate and loving and understanding, one where you feel peaceful around the person, when you feel you can be yourself, where you feel you can speak up and have your voice heard, where you feel you can assert yourself and the other person understands where you're coming from, acknowledges it, and does something about any issues or difficulties you're having. You talk about how you both feel, you come to a conclusion that's good for both of you, you work together as a team, you don't take each other for granted, you don't, break your promises to each other, and this type of thing. This is what a relationship should be focused on, not sex, right? You can have two people having loads of sex, right? But they don't even really like each other. They don't like each other's personalities. They don't get on. They argue. But when the sex is so good, so they stay together for that, right? You could argue that it's not a relationship at all. Just because they're having sex, it's not a relationship. How is that a real relationship when they don't even care about each other? They're just doing it for physical reasons. It's just like they're in this situationship with hooking up, but they've called it a relationship. Do you see what I mean? You could say that about them. That's a big issue in relationships as well. Mm. Yeah, is a big issue in relationships. That there's people that are just having sex and they aren't even caring about the other person. It's just too sexually focused. And to my point, it's like, why is that even defined as a relationship if they don't even like the other person's personality that much? If they got rid of the sex and they never had sex, would they like that person's personality? And in some instances where sex is the main focus and they're not really compatible, the answer would probably be no. They don't really like their partner that much. They're not really into them. They're probably spending more time chatting to someone at work and being into the other person at work while they're at work and stuff like that. But when they come home, it's like, oh, let's have sex. It's been a hard day. Rather than talk things through, rather than turn the TV off and speak to each other and have a healthy relationship where we talk to each other and we discuss like things we enjoy, future goals and plans together, and have dates and all this type of thing. We're busy chatting about, like nothing particularly, and then having sex. That's some people's so-called relationship. To me, I would say that is not even a real relationship because they're not communicating effectively. They're not really loving each other. They're not really getting anything from the other apart from sexual pleasure. Do you know what I mean? And they're probably getting their emotional needs met elsewhere. You could argue that's not a real relationship. How is it? Because they're not even acting as a team. They're just two solo people coming together to enjoy some excitement for a bit. That's it, basically. So, you know, where does society get this idea that it's only if you're having sex that makes a relationship? I think the rules need to be rewritten, as to what is an actual healthy relationship. And if the relationship isn't healthy, is it even a proper relationship, you could argue? What type of relationship is it if it's unhealthy? A lot of times people would say it's a trauma bond. It isn't even love. But I'm sure for some people it does feel like love to them, And I'm sure some people experience love feelings in those ways, So I just think that everyone has beautiful different shapes and sizes of the way they are and the things they like, And so it's up to people what they want in a relationship. You can get trans and non-binary people, and some of these might go in terms of like their own kind. So you might have a trans person or non-binary person with with another trans or non-binary person, or you might get a trans person with a heterosexual person, for example. And some heterosexuals will get ridiculed for that, actually, because they'll be like, oh, you're with a trans person, and they might start ridiculing them because of the gender change in identity, even though that person always felt that gender to begin with, right? So, they might say that that's not a normal, real relationship, but it's only those people in the relationship that should be defining it. You might get people that are really, really kinky and they're into, like I said, BDSM stuff. I'm not into that. And if you're a person who doesn't do that at all, that might not be a real relationship to you, because it might just be like fetishes, BDSM, and that type of thing. But, you might not see the aspects that you believe should be in a relationship. But two people who like BDSM stuff might be very happy with that type of relationship for like ever, in years to come. So, and like I said, if it's an asexual person or a couple of asexual people, some asexuals don't want penetrative sex. They want to do different things within the BDSM kinky realm, but they don't actually want the sex. So that would be sexless, but it would still have fetishes and all sorts of things in it, right? There are people now that want all different types of fetishes and weird and wonderful things, I will say, you know? And it's like some of them do it behind closed doors, but how many documentaries have you seen where they put a collar around their partner and take them out in public? So it's not all behind the scenes. Some of this is in public view as well, right? On display. So I personally am not into any of that stuff. I don't like it. I don't like the pain type of thing. But it's not up for me to define their relationship. It's up to them to define their relationship. It's up to anyone in the relationship to define the relationship. And, you might have a aromantic asexual with a romantic asexual. It doesn't happen very often, I don't think, that pairing, because an aromantic and a romantic are usually the opposites. But you can get some aromantic asexuals that are romance positive. You can get some aromantic asexuals that are cupioromantics. They desire a romantic relationship despite not being romantically attracted themselves to anyone. So you can get an asexual person who is not sexually attracted to anyone, but could be in a sexual relationship because the lack of attraction is not the same as the lack of action. They might still be able to have sex, just they don't look at their partner and think, I want sex with them, in which case their partner would be usually expected to instigate it. But obviously, there's asexuals who don't have sex in relationships. It's not the be all and end all of life or a relationship if you're not having sex in it. Obviously, if you've got a person who loves sex, wants it, needs it, and then got someone who doesn't, then that's not going to work unless you had them seeing other people. But if they're monogamous, if the asexual, for example, is monogamous, sex repulsed, and they're in a relationship with someone and they want it to be monogamous, they don't want them being with anyone else sexually, but the sexual needs sex, then it's not going to work. So there are incompatibilities, right? But there are incompatibilities with lots of different types of relationships, not just for asexuals. I think being asexual does make it harder. I coached someone earlier, and they've been coached by me before in book publishing, actually, but they've got my Asexual Perspectives book and they got my Diary Confessions book, this book. They're not asexual, but they're really enjoying the book. And they said, like, reading the Diary Confessions, that I'm very authentic in it. It's easy to read as well. You can get this on Amazon. And they said that they think that it's a lot harder for me because of my asexuality when it comes to, being around guys, like having guys interested in me or me being interested in guys, because she's like, the guys clearly want you, but you're very good at your boundaries. You're very good at stipulating what you like and what you don't like, and you very good and you love being asexual. And she said that's a really good thing. And that she can see from a Diary Confessions book how difficult it is for an asexual, for example, like myself, who is interested in guys but doesn't want sex with them. She said she can see that, and that's what I really love to do. Is I love to give people insights in real life, which this is my real life behind the scenes of this channel, basically. And I like to give people like real life insights into what it's like to be asexual in multiple situations. And in here, there's a lot of stuff to do with different guys I'm interested in and what happens with them and how things didn't turn out like I thought they were going to. I thought a guy was my soulmate and he wasn't. So yes, in fact, he he was a bit of a nightmare to say the least. But yes, there's more than one guy in there. That's one of them I'm talking about. But it might be more than one of them I'm talking about. But you know, it's good because it shows that it's hard for asexuals to have relationships or to be physical if they've got boundaries, which they should have, and they're, you know, trying to assert themselves. It's hard for an asexual who doesn't want sex to be around heterosexuals and, for example, have a relationship or a dating scenario. It's harder for us, but I love being asexual. I would never ever change being asexual. I thought I was heterosexual for years. I never realized I was asexual until 2014. And I was like, wow, when I found out there's more people like me and that I wasn't the only one who didn't like, want, or need sex ever, then I was like so relieved, you know, and I felt so good when I discovered it. And I've grown stronger as a person in my identity, of my self-identity, and in knowing what I like, want, and dislike because of my asexuality. I love being asexual. I am really proud of being asexual. I'm really proud of being different. I've always known that I was different at school, of quirky, but I never knew the extent to which I was different and am different. And it's kind of like solidifies my own identity of being quirky and different to have something even more different about me by being asexual. So it kind of like gives my differences a boost, you know? It's like you're not just a normal, quirky, different person. You are an amazingly different individual, you know? And that's what makes it even better. But it is hard to get into a relationship, and if you're dating on dating sites, for example, and you have heterosexuals that just expect sex in a relationship because that's what society tells them. And I really wish that all the dating sites would start putting more and more information about asexuality, about sexless relationships, and that sexless relationships are okay because there's other ways to love a person. There's other ways to connect with a person. There's other ways to be in a relationship without sex that can still be fulfilling and joyful and exciting and amazing. And, you know, you don't need to have sex in order for it to be healthy if there's other aspects there that make it healthy, you know, such as compassion and deep emotional connection. Like someone posted a comment on this channel that they're in a relationship with an asexual and they're on about, oh, there's a difference between making love and sex. And while I know that sex and making love both involve genitalia, they're both sex, right? But the difference is obviously that with making love and sex, if you're not sure what the difference is, in terms of the act, you know, it's still genitalia stuff going on, but making love's meant to be more sensual. Like you love the person, you're emotionally connected to them, spiritual connected to them, and you're doing a lot of sensual stuff, foreplay and stuff before you do the sex, right? Exploring the person's body and all this lot, right? But you don't need to have sex to have a deep emotional connection with someone or a deep spiritual connection with someone. You don't have to have that. You can have the most spiritual and emotional connection to someone without sex. And so you could have the most amazing pure love relationship without sex. And that is the most important thing in a relationship. That should be what defines your relationship. How emotionally connected you are, how spiritually and you know, just how connected you are in each other in multiple aspects, so that it's like a kind of 3D experience, if you know what I mean, right? And I said you can make love without having genitalia. I make love with my tongue because I love tongue kissing. That's what I call it, tongue kissing, making love with a tongue. Right? You don't need any genitalia to do that. It's good fun for me personally, anyway. But you know, it's what people define the relationship, you know, like my relationship, if I ever get into a relationship with anyone ever again, It's going to be different to the normal relationship. I'm not interested in having a normal relationship, but I still want a healthy relationship. And a healthy relationship is not based on sex, it's based on the character traits of each other in the relationship and the compatibility aspect. It's based on the fact, is this person kind, caring, loving, giving? Are they understanding? Are they empathetic and sympathetic? Are they just, got kindness in their heart, But often in relationships, people are going for the wrong thing because of movies, right? The bad boy, if you read my Diary Confessions book, you'll notice that I go for bad boys, but I don't mean to. I really don't mean to, but they turn out to be bad boys. So, which, in terms of like literature, romantic books, this is my book's non-fiction, right? But a lot of books out there are fiction, romantic, and a lot of them have got bad boy characters in them because they're very attractive on a physiological level, right? But that's not what makes a healthy relationship. And people shouldn't be defining a relationship by sex, because people could be having sex with a really bad person, a person who's got abusive, narcissistic character traits. And so that shouldn't be like, oh, you've got a real relationship because you're having sex. It's like, no, if you have got a relationship which a person's abusing you in it, that's an abusive relationship that you need to get out of, not a loving, kind, caring one. Right? You could meet the most wonderful person of your dreams that doesn't have sex at all with you, but loves you in multiple ways and is kind, caring, and going to be there for you no matter what, versus the person who's gonna have sex with you, may make you feel excitable or whatever if you're into sex and enjoy the sensations of it, but may make you feel shit about yourself, may make you feel really lonely in the relationship, may make you feel misunderstood, unheard, unseen, may contradict what they say, may confuse you, put you on a roller coaster of emotions, yet because they're having sex that's defined as a real relationship. It's not good. It's not a good relationship. So only the people who are in that relationship should be defining that relationship. But if we're going to define relationships as a society, we shouldn't be looking at the sex aspect as to whether that defines a relationship. We should be looking at the actual aspects of healthy relationships and what makes a healthy relationship that people should be in, and what makes a bad relationship that may even be a trauma bond that people should look to get out of immediately, right? Which obviously a lot of people can't get out of them immediately because they're emotionally attached. One person at least is. But we should be redefining what makes a relationship, if we're going to define a relationship, by, compatibility, character traits, and everything like that. You could have two people that have great sex but are completely incompatible. You could argue that that isn't a real relationship. It's just sex. That's all it is. So the fact that society is defining a relationship by whether you have sex in it or not is completely ludicrous. It's very outdated for the 21st century, and people should be re-educated on these things. But it's not up to outsiders to say what makes a relationship and what doesn't. It's up to the people in it to say if they are in a relationship with each other and they're committed to each other and they're committed to actually being in a relationship. I've learned through Matthew Hussey's Love Life Club and, you know, teachings and things like that, that you're not actually even in a relationship unless both of you decide you're in a relationship. So some people can end up in a situation where they have someone who they believe is their partner, they believe they're in a relationship with, but unless that person's actually said to you, or you've said to them, do you want to be in a relationship with me? And they've answered yes, you're not actually in a relationship. Some people are in, for example, a connection with someone for 2 years, and that because they're in a connection with 2 years, maybe they've met the person's parents and relatives and all this type of thing, but there's not actually been a relationship established. You're not actually in a relationship with that person unless you've defined you're definitely in a relationship. It's not a goes without saying thing, but a lot of people in society don't understand this. And you have to actually have one or both of you, say, do you want to be in a relationship with me? Like, will you be my boyfriend? Will you be my girlfriend? Will you be my fiance or whatever, but will you be in a relationship with me? You have to ask them to be in a relationship with you. You can't just assume, because there are people that are serial daters. They'll date for 6 months, they'll date for a year or whatever, but they won't actually commit. So there has to be really commitment. You have to be defining it. So if you come into a dating scenario, yes, you can date for between 1 and 3 months. By that time, you should have decided whether you want to be in a relationship or not with the person, right? And then if you haven't decided by 3 months, it's probably you're not really suitable for a relationship. It doesn't mean to say you're not for definite, but maybe you're not at that time. You're not ready. You're not really at the stage for commitment. But and then people have to move on. You can't hang around for someone. You should never hang around for someone in the hope that they one day want to be committed to you if they're not committing to you within a certain type of time frame. You can't wait around for them forever. You don't want to be in a situationship, which is friends with benefits, and that person's never actually committing to you. So don't just think the person's committed to you unless they've asked you, will you be my girlfriend? Will you be my boyfriend? Husband, wife, or whatever. Usually you wouldn't skip to husband, wife first of all. You skip to boyfriend, girlfriend, right? Or partner. Will you be my life partner, right? This type of thing. If you don't want to get married, then you wouldn't be asking the husband or wife question. Anyway, so, and obviously it depends what gender you are as to whether you might want to ask those questions or not, and which of you might want to ask the other one. But the whole point is besides of what makes a relationship and that defines a relationship, you actually have to define that you're in a relationship with that person. And don't just take it for granted just because you've seen their family and their friends and you've been to birthday parties or Christmas parties with them and you're seeing them like 5 days a week that you're actually in a relationship. Always ask for clarity, like, are we in a relationship? Because there are some people out there that just don't want commitment and they'll just go along like they are in a relationship with you without actually committing to you. And that is really bad. You do not want that at all. So make sure that if you want a serious committed relationship, you're very upfront with that at the dating stage. You don't have to say, I want to date you, and our first date, I want to be in a relationship with you right now. That's not what I'm talking about. But you need to make it clear, if you're looking for a serious committed relationship, that when you're dating, you put in your bio, look, I'm looking for a serious long-term committed relationship, right? So they know that if they're going to date you, that's your intention. But you might still, and usually do, need to emphasize that. Because a lot of the time on dating sites, they don't read bios. They just look at your picture. The amount of guys I had in my past that never read my bio and that literally just liked my photograph. I'm talking hundreds of people. Guys. I'm not talking about just a few odd ones. Hundreds of them. Right? So you've got to make sure that you say to them that especially if you've got someone who likes you, who's got on their bio casual relationship, right? You need to be saying, I'm not looking for a casual relationship. I'm looking for a serious relationship. So we're not suitable, right? That's it. So make sure if you're defining a relationship that you are defining it with that person and defining what it actually is, where it's something serious, committed, whether it's a hookup, where it's casual, what type of thing it is. And if you are not happy with how they are defining the relationship that you're in with them, then don't be in the relationship with them. Don't be in the situationship with them. But obviously talk to them first. And if they say, look, we're not in a relationship, say, okay, well, if we're not in a relationship, then we shouldn't be doing relationship stuff. We shouldn't be seeing each other like 5 days a week. We shouldn't be going around to each other's places. We shouldn't be sharing other parts of our lives, because that should be reserved for an actual serious relationship. And whilst you're wasting your time with the person who's not willing to commit to you, the person who might be willing to commit to you can't even speak to you or see you because you're too busy committed to the wrong person, even though they're not committed to you. So please do not make this mistake, right? Everyone makes mistakes, but please try not to make this mistake of thinking that you're in a serious committed relationship if they have not defined it like that. And especially if in their bio they've said casual at the beginning and you've ignored it, don't ignore this stuff. If someone wants casual, think they want casual. If you don't want that, don't even bother speaking to them. It's a waste of your time. So many people waste their time speaking to people that are completely incompatible. If that person has already shown you that they're not going to be suitable for you because they're not matching your needs, they're not giving you what you want, then move on. Say, I appreciate your time, but I don't think we're compatible. I'm moving on now, and move on. Don't hanker after someone that's not really into you the same way you're into them. So not only should you be living by the rules between you in a relationship of what commitment is, what flirting is, what you need to do to be loyal and faithful to each other, you should also be defining the relationship as what actually is it? Are you in a relationship or not? Or are you just in a situationship? Are you just having to be both together at times, but no one's actually defined something? So please do take all these things into consideration. But so you need to define. There might be friends and family that, hey, oh, you've been in a relationship like 6 months with so and so, but that person hasn't actually asked you to be in a relationship. Just because your friends, family, or whoever is saying you're in a relationship together, again, that's outside influence. It's not up to them to decide if you're in a relationship or not. It's up to the two people or more people, if you're polyamorous, that's in the relationship to define that it's in a relationship. But you need everyone in the relationship to define it, not just one person, because one person on its own doesn't make a relationship in the first place. May as well just be single, talk to a brick wall. You know what I'm saying? So please do not make this mistake. Make sure that if you'll define a relationship, you're doing it on your own terms and the other person's own terms, and you're coming together to like form a plan together, to like be understanding towards each other, to form some sort of goals for the future, to have a vision together, you know, and to actually make sure you're compatible in the first place, that your different lifestyles and different ways of being will work out together as much as possible. If you're very different and incompatible, then the definition is they're not suitable for a relationship. And so you'll have to part your ways. So please take these things into consideration, that no one should be defining the relationship other than the people that are in it, and make sure that you do start defining what type of relationship you're in or not in sooner rather than later, so you don't get attached and end up with heartache and heartbreak. I hope you've liked this video. If you've got any comments, queries, or questions, please post them. Thank you to Heather for being in chat tonight. This quote was quote 70 of Diary Confessions of a Highly Romantic Asexual, 78 Life Lessons to Asexual Life. I've got a couple of people who I know for definite reading this at the moment. So if you haven't got your copy yet, please go to Amazon and grab your copy of this best-selling book. It has got 78 Life Lessons to Asexual Life, and I've just given you one of those tonight, which I hope has been insightful for you. And grab Asexual Perspectives on Amazon too. And thanks, Heather, and thanks to everyone else who's been watching. Lots of love to you, and I appreciate you loads. Always stay ace, and see you soon on the next video live stream. Don't forget to check out the posts in the communities tab. You'll see also that I posted my Oxford University talk now, so go and watch that. And notice I've got asexual merchandise if you're looking for some new asexual clothes, t-shirts and stuff. Lots of love to you. Take care. Bye. Subscribe and hit the bell icon.